Hey friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, back again with another video, and today is day 5 of Plantmas. I can't believe we're almost halfway through the videos, and today I am super excited to be doing my very first monthly setup in my new bullet journal for 2022. This is my January setup, and I've gone with a polar bear inspired theme. As always, all of the supplies I'm using in this video will be linked in the description box down below, so check that out if you're looking for any supplies in particular. And of course, I will be sharing many facts about polar bears in this video. Stay tuned till the end of the video for yet another Plantmas giveaway. Starting with the cover page as always, and today I decided to do a full page cover page and a full page quote. As I mentioned, this is a polar bear inspired theme, and I really wanted it to be polar bears out on a snowy night. I've decided to create 2 polar bears, a mama bear and her cub, and do a couple paintings of them in the snow on a clear night. So I'm starting by painting the background a nice dark blue, and I actually pulled out every blue paint that I own before I started doing this because I thought I was going to mix so many different blues together, and I ended up basically only using one blue and my white for all of the paintings, which is awesome for anyone who wants to recreate these. You don't have to buy a bunch of supplies, but I surprised myself that I didn't end up dipping into all of my other shades of blue paint. So the blue paint that I used was from Winsor & Newton's Cotman watercolor line, and it's the Prussian blue. Last time I used it, I apparently mispronounced Prussian, and I got a lot of comments telling me that I said it wrong, so hopefully this time I said it right. You can let me know in the comments. I'm sure you will. So using Prussian blue with a little bit of water, I'm creating a nice dark background, and I'm not too worried about it being super consistent or uniform. I kind of like the variation in color. I think it's more interesting. Once that first layer is dry, I'm going in to add a little bit more variation to the sky on this first painting. So I'm mixing some zinc white into the Prussian blue to get a lighter shade and creating a round area that is going to gradually fade out into the darkness of the sky. That gradual gradient effect that I'm getting just by mixing different amounts of white and blue together. The center of this light area will have the moon in it. I just wanted it to look like the moon was so bright that it was lighting up the sky around it. Letting that area dry, and I'm starting to work on the bottom section of the painting. This is going to be a mound of snow that the polar bears are sitting on. So again, I'm working with a bit of a gradient effect from dark to light. Dark at the bottom that's furthest away from the light of the moon, and then it gets lighter near the top where the polar bears and the snow they're sitting on are lit more directly by that bright moonlight. I'm working in pretty thick layers here, so I needed to leave that to dry for a little while, and I decided to switch over to the other side, which is going to be the first of 2 quote pages for this setup. And I decided to quote Aristotle for this setup. So the quote I'm using is, "To appreciate the beauty of a snowflake, it is necessary to stand out in the cold." I thought that was a beautiful sentiment. I thought it really fit with this theme, the idea of a really frigid Arctic night with lots of snowfall, but it's also a great metaphor for life, just the idea that sometimes the most difficult trials in life can lead to the most wonderful rewards. And I feel like this quote is just so representative of that phenomenon, and also just a reminder that sometimes if you're going through something hard, there is going to be something so worthwhile on the other end. I'm using a white acrylograph with the 0.7mm nib to write out this quote, and once I'm done with that, switching back over to the cover page where I'm starting to add some trees. I'm using my very basic messy tree painting technique, which is draw a vertical line for the trunk and then a bunch of horizontal messy lines for branches. Very straightforward and yet effective. I kind of liked how the wet brush with my white paint started to activate the blue underneath so that the trees had a bit of a blue tinge to them. I feel like this is pretty accurate to how everything white looks in a very snowy landscape. Everything has that little bit of a cool blue tinge to it, so I didn't worry about that too much. And then I grabbed my circle template and my white acrylograph to create the crescent moon. While polar bears likely evolved between 300 to 500,000 years ago, the polar bear didn't receive its Latin name until 1774. Ursus maritimus refers to the animal's close association with the Arctic's chilly waters and sea ice. Now it's time to fill in my bears that I sketched in pencil, so I'm doing quite a few layers just to build them up to be as white as possible. Again, painting on this dark background is activating it and turning the white paint blue, which you could avoid if you wanted to by leaving those shapes clear of any paint, but I didn't mind doing several layers to make sure that they were nice and bright. Home to 2/3 of the world's polar bears, Arctic and subarctic Canada has many indigenous cultures and peoples that have coexisted with polar bears for thousands of years. These indigenous groups include Inuit, Dene, Cree, and Métis, among others. Of course, indigenous people in the north have had their own names for polar bears in many languages and dialects for thousands of years. The Inuit name for polar bears is Nanook. Adult polar bears can weigh as much as 590 kilograms, or 1,300 pounds, and stand over 3 meters or 10 feet tall when standing on their hind legs. Researchers in Canada estimated one male bear at 800 kilograms, or 1,700 pounds. I also wrote January across the bottom, again with my white acrylograph, and went in with a small flat brush with white with a tiniest bit of blue mixed in to create shadows on the bears. So this is just the slightest tinge of blue to add a little bit more dimension to the bears to make them look more three-dimensional. And I'm also using a Secura Micron to add in the little details of their noses, their eyes, and the little hole in their ear. Using some craft paper to protect my desk, I'm flicking white paint all over these paintings to create a snow effect. And I decided to cover my lettering and my bears for the first splattering, just to make sure I didn't get too much snow that would cover up any details of the words or of my bears, and then went in more carefully to add snow in that area. I left those paintings to dry overnight and then removed the washi tape for those super crisp lines, and flipping the page over to get started on my calendar spread. Female polar bears typically have a litter every 3 years, starting at age 5. Newborns weigh little more than half a kilogram, or 1 pound, and are around 30 centimeters long, or 12 inches. When born, they're blind, toothless, and covered with soft, short fur. Polar bears live in 19 populations across the Arctic region of the circumpolar north. About 60% of the polar bear population in the world live within or are shared by Canada. Polar bears are also found in Alaska, Russia, Greenland, and Norway. In the Arctic, temperatures can plunge colder than -40 degrees Celsius or -50 degrees Fahrenheit and stay that way for days or weeks at a time. But luckily, polar bears are built for these conditions. Polar bears have 2 layers of fur that prevent almost all heat loss. In addition to their fur, they have a thick layer of fat, which keeps them warm in the water since wet fur is a poor insulator. Their fat and fur keeps them so warm that adults can quickly overheat when they run. That's why they typically walk at a slow pace. This month I decided to go back to my round habit trackers, and I love that I can divide these circles in different amounts depending on the habit and how often I want to do it. Each day that I complete one of these habits, I fill in a little piece of that ring in the hopes that I can fill the ring in completely by the end of the month. This month I decided to track filling my rings on my Apple Watch, doing my morning routine and my evening routine, taking a day off every week, and also finding joy every day, making sure that I take a moment every day to stop and find joy in something or someone. Even though polar bears move slowly, they can travel more than 1,000 kilometers in a single season. Polar bears have huge paws as big as dinner plates, which allow them to spread out their weight over a larger area, which means that they won't break through thin ice. Their forepaws act like large paddles when they're swimming, and their hind paws serve as rudders. They also have black foot pads on the bottom of each paw that are covered by small soft bumps known as papillae. The papillae grip the ice and keep the bear from slipping. They also have tufts of fur between their toes and foot pads to help with warmth. Today I learned that my cat Chewy is a polar bear because he also has tufts of fur between his toes. I'm cutting tabs for my weeklies yet again. For anyone who might want to cut tabs in their own bullet journal, I cut the edge of these pages 2 spaces in from the edge or along the 3rd column of dots from the edge. And for the tabs themselves, the diagonal sections are 2 by 2 spaces and the long edge is 4 spaces tall. Polar bears' claws are thick, curved, sharp, and strong, measuring more than 5 centimeters or about 2 inches long. Polar bears use their claws to hunt and to gain traction on the ice. Polar bears have small and round ears and short, compact tails to prevent heat loss. Polar bears sleep around 7 to 8 hours at a time, and they also take naps. In winter, polar bears sleep in shallow pits they dig in the snow, putting their sides or backs to the wind. They can sleep right through blizzards, letting the snow pile up on top of them like an insulating blanket. In the summer, polar bears curl up on the sea ice, sometimes using a block of ice or a paw as a pillow. Polar bears communicate with each other through body language, vocalizations, and scent markings. Polar bears wag their heads side to side when they want to play and greet each other by touching their noses together. Polar bears also make a few sounds like chuffing, which is a vocal response to stress, hissing and snorting when they're feeling aggressive, loud roars or growls when they're angry, and deep, low growls as a warning. I'm painting my tabs using a nice gradient of blues, again mixing different amounts of zinc white with my Prussian blue, and using my scrap paper from cutting my tabs as a backdrop to make sure I don't get any paint on other pages, and using washi tape for a clean edge. As you can see, I also cut the top of the pages here to create a little bit of a window. I wanted to be able to see little slivers of a snowy night sky along the top of my weeklies, no matter which page I was on. This is something I tried for the first time in my November setup, and I really enjoyed it, so I've been playing with this idea ever since. There are an estimated 26,000 polar bears left worldwide, and without action on climate change, we could lose all but a few polar bear populations by the end of this century. Polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt, breed, roam, and sometimes to den, but the Arctic is warming and ice is melting due to human-caused climate change. Already in parts of the Arctic, longer ice-free seasons and longer fasting periods have led to a decline in some polar bear populations, including the western Hudson Bay population in Canada, where the polar bear population has dropped by 30% since the 1980s. Research shows that without action to greatly reduce carbon emissions and stabilize our climate, we could lose all but a few polar bear populations by the end of this century. Now it's time for the final spread in this setup, and I'm starting by creating a nice dark blue background yet again. For my second quote page, I decided to go with something super simple and to the point. Snow is magic. Maybe it's just me, but growing up in Canada, I have always adored the snow, and it always has such a magical feel to it. The first day that you wake up and there's a blanket of snow over everything, it's like you woke up in a brand new world, like you've been transported to Narnia or something. And I've always loved the cold, crisp air of a winter morning and the feeling of a snowflake falling onto your nose and melting there. I'm just a Canadian through and through, I guess is what I'm saying. For my final painting of the bear mama and her cub, I'm painting them walking away across the ice with the baby riding on her mom's back. I always think it's so adorable when I see videos or pictures of cubs riding their mom's backs. They just look so cozy and adorable, and I love it. I'm creating the ice by using zinc white to streak the paint across horizontally and letting those darker areas where the paint is being reactivated underneath shine through to give an indication of that deep blue ice where you can kind of see that there is water underneath and a little bit of snow on top, that sort of slightly transparent, icy look. As for the bears, I'm starting off by trying to get them as white as possible on this first layer, and I'm gonna let that completely dry and go back in to finish off making them completely white. I'm also flicking my white paint all over the page to get my snow effect, including my tabs, because I thought it would be really fun if the tabs themselves also had snowflakes. If you enjoyed today's polar bear facts, leave a bear or snow-related emoji in the comments down below. Before I finish off that final painting, I want to set up my weekly spreads, and of course I'm using my rolling weekly yet again. Who is surprised? Not me. If you don't know anything about the rolling weekly and you would like to, I'll link my video that explains it in detail in the cards and in the description box down below. Setting up each day of my weekly as well as the weekly task list. Keeping my weekly super simple as always, and that's why I really like this cutaway effect where I can see some sort of color, some sort of design element along the sides from the tabs and also from the cutaway, so that even though my weeklies are super simple and really fast to set up, they still have some aspect of the theme shining through. Now it's time to finish off this final painting by going over the polar bear and her cub to get as even of a white effect as possible for their fur. This reminds me of another fun fact, which is that polar bear fur actually isn't white. It just looks white. Each hair shaft is pigment-free and transparent, with a hollow core that scatters and reflects visible light. Super cool. Once I have my bears completely white, I'm going in with white mixed with a tiny bit of dried black paint that was on my palette just to make a bit of a gray shade to create shadows. And that's it for this setup, so I'll do a flip through of all of the spreads here. I love how looking at these paintings really makes me feel cold, like I'm out on a cold winter night. And I just love the polar bears so much. I think I'm biased because I grew up with a mom who loves polar bears, and we had so much polar bear art in our house growing up, and feeling some sort of an affinity for polar bears since the majority of the polar bear population in the world live in northern Canada. I'm so excited to move into my new bullet journal in a couple weeks, even though I'll be sad to move out of my last one, which reminds me tomorrow's Plantmas video is a full flip through of my bullet journal I've used for the last 6 months. So check that out if you want to see what all my spreads look like when they're fully filled in and messy. For today's Plantmas giveaway, I am giving one lucky winner my B5 Sunrise cloth notebook from my collaboration with Archer and Olive. This is the notebook I used for the last 6 months, and it is my favorite of my whole collaboration. It was also all of your favorites, selling out the fastest of any notebook, and I know a lot of people didn't manage to get one, so I'm very excited to be able to send one of my personal extra notebooks out to one of you to enjoy. The rules are very simple, so check out the description box to see all of those. Make sure you follow them carefully because I hate having to disqualify someone from winning because they didn't follow the rules. Thank you as always to my patrons for your support. If you want to join us, feel free. There's a link in the card and in the description box down below. And with that, I'm gonna get going. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me through the first 5 days of Plantmas, and I'll see you very soon tomorrow for Plantmas Day 6. Bye, friends.